Today on Network Africa, Benin authorities punish those whom they say were responsible for a blast at a rubbish site that led to the deaths of 16 people last week. Libya's controversial General Khalifa Haftar is promoted to Field Marshal by parliamentarians despite his rift with the unity government. Plus, Nigeria making headlines at the Rio Paralympics as Josephine Orji sets a new world record in powerlifting. Let's begin Network Africa. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. I am Amarachi Ubani. Officials in Benin Republic have begun tracking down those whom they say were behind the blast at the rubbish site that led to the deaths of 16 people just outside the city of Cotonou. 3 officials, a regional commissioner, local paramilitary police chief and customs official have been suspended because they did not provide adequate safety measures before the blast occurred. A company had reportedly dumped flour and spoiled wheat at the landfill, setting it on fire last week. But local people flocked to the sections that were burning to try to take foodstuffs when there was an explosion last Thursday. 16 people were said to have died, many more were injured. Protests are continuing in Zimbabwe over its economy, but the country's banker is ignoring widespread opposition to so-called bond notes that says it will be introducing a cash substitute next month. A bank is introducing 2, 5, 10 and $20 notes to help alleviate cash shortage, which has forced the government to delay paying salaries each month to civil servants and to those in the security forces. Meanwhile, a wing flap that washed ashore on Pemba, part of the archipelago of Zanzibar in Tanzania, has been identified as belonging to missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. According to Australian officials, MH370 had been flying from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. It was carrying 239 people on board when it just vanished into thin air in March 2014. That flight is presumed to have crashed into the southern Indian Ocean after veering off course. For about 3 years, investigators have been looking for missing pieces to the crash and have found a few debris that they think may be connected to the missing MH370. A number of other pieces, some confirmed to have come from MH370, have been found in countries near Madagascar. Kenyan prosecutors have applied for Hania Saga Rogo, the widow of a murdered Muslim cleric, to remain in custody for 14 days as they investigate her alleged links with a recent attack in Mombasa. They told the court there that Mrs. Rogo was arrested for having direct connections with one of the 3 women who were killed that Sunday. 3 women had approached a police station in Mombasa and stabbed a police officer before throwing in a petrol bomb that engulfed the police station. That officer, I think, died, and the only people, who died in that attack were the 3 women because they were shot down by police officers. Now, Mrs. Rogo's lawyers object to the application, saying that there was no evidence that she intended to leave the jurisdiction of the court. The 3 women who are suspected to have helped the attackers are being investigated for the offense of collecting funds for the benefit of people involved in organizing acts of terror. They were also charged with helping people who were organizing acts of terror. Magistrate Emmanuel Mutunga said serious issues have been raised on both sides and he would be making his ruling tomorrow morning. Mrs. Rogo, whose husband, Aboud Rogo Mohammed, has been accused of recruiting for Al-Shabaab before his death in 2012. Mrs. Rogo, however, will remain in custody until the judge's ruling tomorrow morning. Meanwhile, the repatriation of Somali refugees from the Dadaab refugee camp in Kenya has failed to meet international standards, according to Human Rights Watch reports, which has found the organization saying that many of those returning to Somalia are motivated by fear of being forced out again. Tens of thousands of refugees have been making the journey home after years in the camp. Both Kenya and Somalia do say that it is time that the Dadaab camp has been shut down as the largest in the world. Duke Mwancha at the UN Refugee Camp Agency did tell media that the UNHCR is looking into the Human Rights Watch report and that the UNHCR supports refugees who want to go home voluntarily, and that about over 30,000 of them have returned since December 2014. Speaking of reports, we're looking at one now that says a Swiss-based non-governmental organization criticizing commodity trading firms in Switzerland for their links to the trade of fuel to African countries, which they say have toxin levels that would be illegal in Europe. That report, titled Dirty Diesel, says that diesel retailers are exploiting weak regulatory standards to profit from dirty fuel sold to African consumers. The report alleges that some diesel samples collected in 8 African countries contained sulfur levels that were more than 300 times that which is permitted in Europe. Although this is legal, within legal means, limits set by national governments, diesel fumes from such fuel could increase respiratory illnesses like asthma and bronchitis in affected countries. The report also says that 4 Swiss commodity companies, Vital, Trafigura, Adax, Oryx and Lynx Energy, benefit from this trade as shareholders in the distribution companies. But Trafigura and Vital do say that the report is misconceived and that they operate at arm's length from the retailers who work within strict legal limits in these countries. Our energy correspondent, Olu Phillips, joins me now to talk more about this. Olu, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Hello, viewers.
What should we understand from this report?
Let's take it, for instance, from the Nigerian perspective. The reason crude oil is called sweet crude is because naturally it contains a low-level sulfur, which makes the crude light and allows for refining and distillation. Some of that crude, for instance, like the ones from Saudi Arabia, has high-level sulfur, means that you have to do a lot of cracking before you can get all those derivatives. Okay, so but again, it also has its own advantage. Like those kind of crude that you get from places like heavy crude, like they have heavy sulfur, like from Saudi Arabia, you can use them to get bitumen and other byproducts from the crude. But that of Nigeria, it's easier for you to produce and get like PMS, aviation fuel, and diesel. But talking about diesel and the high-level content of ppm, which is parts per million level as allowed by countries, I think it's just economic considerations. People get involved in this business for shoddy economic considerations.
So you're saying it is possible that some of this dirty fuel has entered into Nigeria?
I do know that we have regulatory standards here in Nigeria. Once the ship berths at Apapa or in Port Harcourt, there are regulatory agencies like DPL that have standards, that have provided standards that you must meet when you bring it in. And if they don't meet those standards, you'll be asked to turn it back. And I know that the Nigerian bandwidth is between 500 to about 5,000 or 500 to about 2,000 ppm legally allowed in the country. We were higher than that in sometime in 2005. But there are countries like Tunisia, Egypt, and Congo-Brazzaville that within the legal means allow their ppm sulfur content to be as high as 10,000. So it's just a case of what a country allows to come in. But in Nigeria here, I do not see any reason why anybody wants to bring in any diesel that has high-level sulfur, because it doesn't even, the machineries that we have back home here would not allow for that kind of diesel.
Olu, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
We do hope we have more on this much later. Well, coming up on the program in just a minute. Well, the new record setter in the Paralympics in Rio, Josephine Orji, she is making headlines. Join us again for more on what she's been doing in Rio.